Hi, I'm Raymond. You're watching RPAD TV. We have an excellent show for you today that is all about What If Season 2. Now, before we get into things, let's do some housekeeping. If you like this episode and want to support the channel, please like, subscribe. All my socials are up there. And joining me today is the excellent Paul Semel, veteran video game journalist, former editor of the video game section of Gene Simmons' Tongue. It's a new year. I have to get that joke in.
Yeah.
So might as well do it now.
Yeah.
You can check out Paul's stuff at paulsemel.com. A lot of great content, reviews, interviews. Paul, give us an update on what's cooking. Literally what's cooking, because you wrote about a cookbook recently.
I did.
I
interviewed a guy who co-wrote a Diablo cookbook.
Yes. So what does that entail?
Well, he didn't write the recipes. He only wrote the lore. So the idea was somebody else would come up with like a recipe and be like, oh, this is a dish they would serve in this part of the world.
Oh.
And then he would come up with like a little story to go with it. Which is a little different from most of the video game related cookbooks that I've seen. Like usually it's just the recipes. Maybe they say like, if it's like a Halo one, they'll say like, oh, this was a traditional dish on the planet Reach, but they won't like go into anything more than that. And this guy wrote much more elaborate sort of, not that much more elaborate, like a paragraph, but still he wrote a little more about the, like why this is a dish and what makes it typical of this region of Azeroth, or, is it Azeroth? Is that World of Warcraft? I don't know.
That is World of Warcraft. Yes.
Right. Okay. But you get the idea. So yeah. So there was that. And then I have props as always. This week I also interviewed Dean Koontz.
Ooh. Oh wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So he has a new book. It's coming out on the 1st of February called The Bad Weather Friend, which seems very, very interesting. But the reason I ran it this week is that it is, I guess I didn't know this. Amazon does like picks for books of the month. And they do like a bunch of them. They do like, the science fiction pick and the fantasy pick and whatnot. And his is the thriller pick. And what that means is if you are a Prime member, you can get the book for free on your Kindle, or $2 if you're not a Prime member. And then on February 1st, when the book comes out, you can get the hardcover and all that fun stuff. So
very cool.
Yeah. He's fun because I've done a couple interviews with him now, and he's just starting to get very like jokey with me and like sort of like loosen up and stuff. Because one of the things about the book is the idea is that there's someone who's like 7 feet tall. And I was like, is there a reason why they're 7 feet tall as opposed to 7 inches tall or invisible? And he went into this whole long thing, which really was like, just like, well, 7 feet tall are more intimidating. But he was like, why would they be invisible, Paul? What do you have a problem with people who are invisible? And I'm like, he's gotten sort of feisty with me, which I think is funny. So
I dig it. So check out that interview on Dean Koontz's new book, and definitely check out that Diablo cookbook story on paulsemel.com. Now, today's episode is about What If Season 2. Before we get into the reviewy part of it, I wanted to ask you about your background with the What If comics, because they were something I always loved as a kid, like having these alternate stories, like what if Phoenix had lived? I remember being like, what if Phoenix had lived? That's a damn interesting premise. So, they're uneven because it depends on what premise they're going after. But I was always fascinated by, What If and DC, the Elseworld stories. So I dig this kind of thing. How about you?
I do too. Yeah. I mean, I think that some of the DC ones have been a little different because they're not like, with Marvel, it was always sort of like, well, what if Thor had been a woman? Like it was sort of an alternate version of things.
Yeah.
Whereas with DC, it would be more like, well, let's see what Batman would be like if he had been around during the time of Jack the Ripper. Like it is a little different, but interesting nonetheless, because especially if you're a big fan of those characters, you're like, I wonder what it would be like if Superman had landed in Russia, Kansas, or like, what would it be like if Spider-Man had been a monkey? Like, right. And what I love is that some of those things have come to actually become real. Like they're one of the ones is early, I think in the 60s even, was what if Thor had been a woman? And of course, then they later were like, hey, you know what? That's a really good idea.
Right. And then we got to see Natalie Portman's incredible triceps on the big screen.
Yeah.
Did Frog Thor come out from that? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I don't think Frog Thor was a what if, but he could have been. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff of like where they'll just throw in like weird things like, what if the Marvel universe was, made of cheese or something, although we should point out that the TV show is a little bit different because it is specific to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
Like they don't kind of just throw things in there at random. Like, it's always sort of like, what if Captain America hadn't been frozen for 70 years?
Right. Right. Oh, and I do want to give a warning to people out there. I am still maintaining my perfect record of being sick for all of 2024. So if I start on a coughing spell, I will try to hit the mute button, but you will see me reaching for cough drops probably a lot throughout this episode. Now, let us kick things off with a thread-sized review of What If Season 2. What do you got for me, Paul?
I would say that Season 2 was less even than Season 1, but actually just as entertaining and engaging and fun.
I very much agree with you. I would say What If Season 2 starts out a little bumpy, but finishes amazingly.
Yes.
So let's get into some individual episodes. Were there any episodes of What If Season 2 that stood out for you? Which ones did you like the best?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was the Christmas episode. Or as it could also be known, the Die Hard episode.
Yes.
Which I can understand why people are like, no, that's too jokey, but like that to me was what made it really just so much fun. It was so silly and weird, and it was just them having fun with the whole Die Hard thing and everything else, and Christmas threads as well. And that one was really, really fun. I did enjoy the first one with Nebula. I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk genre. I'm a big fan of Blade Runner, and it was very Blade Runner.
Interesting.
Which I liked. It also had Howard the Duck, which I also am a big fan of when it comes to this stuff.
Well, the Christmas one also had Kat Dennings, which also makes everything fun. So
yeah. The more you can get Darcy in there, and I loved it. Like they seem to love Darcy as much as like everybody else seems to love Darcy, and Kat Dennings seems to love playing Darcy as much as everybody loves Darcy. So like that's she's one of those characters who I hope she continues to like turn up in just weird places in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, going forward.
I very much agree with you.
Yeah. But then as for other good episodes, the last batch were really good. When all the Captain Carter ones, of course, were, I think, the highlight of the season. But also like the one with Hela, like I loved that they got Cate Blanchett to play her in the movies. Like I was like, wow, that's cool. And the fact that they got her to come back, it was just great, and I think that speaks volumes about her. I was thinking about this afternoon, like, we regard her as such a great actress, and there are so many great actresses who don't seem to have a sense of humor about themselves and don't seem to they seem to take themselves way too seriously. And they would be like, I'm not doing a superhero movie.
Right.
And Cate Blanchett is like, hell yeah, I'm doing a superhero movie. And I want to be in a bodysuit and like kick ass. And wait, you want me to come back and play her in a cartoon? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. I think that speaks volumes about her as a person too. So
that was actually my favorite episode of the whole run. I mean, Kate Blanchett was so delightful as Hela, and just cracking wise the whole time. Great rapport with the other actors, and I love this story because it blends the Asgard world with the the Shang-Chi world.
Yeah,
and it was such a nice juxtaposition, and it worked really well together in a way that I was not expecting at all. The other one that stood out for me was the first Captain Carter episode with the Hydra Stomper. I thought that was really great. I loved her dynamic with Black Widow, who was voiced by Lake Bell, not Scarlett Johansson, but Lake Bell is a big favorite of ours from the Harley Quinn series as well. I still love that joke that I made you crack with what if Amanda Peet didn't have giant horse teeth? You'd have Lake Bell. So she was great as Natasha.
Yeah.
And really the second half to me was just much, much better than the first half of the series.
Yes. I would agree with that, but I would agree with that mostly because there were two episodes, the second and the fourth specifically, the Peter Quill episode and the Iron Man episode, that were like, they weren't like bad, but they weren't like as interesting or as cool or as the other ones. Although they did have their moments, like they all had little moments here and there that I was like, okay, that's really funny, or that's really insightful. And
right, I will agree with 50% of that, and you will see why throughout this episode. There's actually a few reasons for that, but let's stick on that. So episodes you didn't care for. So you would say episodes 2 and was it 3?
It was 4. It was
2 and 4.
So it was the Peter Quill, which I was like, okay, that's all right.
Right.
And then the Iron Man one, which that one just struck me as being kind of childish. And I don't mean childish like immature. I meant like it seemed more like, it kind of reminded me of like a kid's cartoon.
Yeah, like wacky races.
Yeah, or like that weird TV show where Batman is a car and the Joker is a car, and like, you know what I mean? Or like, yeah, it didn't really kind of, I don't know. There was something about the writing of those episodes wasn't nearly as good as the writing of the other ones. There wasn't nearly as snappy and as smart as the other ones.
And it almost felt like the dialogue was too dense in that episode. Like there was so much dialogue that I'm like, hey, let's breathe a little bit, guys, and let the story happen. It's interesting that you like the first episode because of that noir, that Blade Runner aspect of it. I did not like the first episode as much, and it's has nothing to do with the story itself, which I thought was fine and really good for the reasons that you mentioned. But it's because of James Gunn's version of the Nova Corps. We had John C. Reilly as being like the main Nova Corps character in the first Guardians movie. So they were never established as being competent or good at their jobs.
Right.
So seeing them as a threat and being menacing, it didn't quite work for me. I mean, these are supposed to be intergalactic space cops, but they're in the Marvel universe, in the MCU, they've always been more like comic relief characters,
right?
Instead of Marvel's equivalent of the Green Lantern Corps. So because of that, it didn't work for me as much. I kept thinking of them as a joke throughout the whole time. As much as I love John C. Reilly, he is not what I think of when I think of intergalactic space cops. So,
right.
Well, neither is Glenn Close. So
right.
Yeah. Although she's more like a space commissioner, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she got booted to the front office. So because of that, it didn't work for me. And I love the Nebula character too. So
right.
I was a little disappointed in that one. Now let's talk about voice actors. As I mentioned, Lake Bell impressed me as Natasha. The voice acting was an interesting mix. I was surprised with all the people they actually got. I looked it all up after I watched it on IMDb to see who were the sound alikes and who are the real actors. But for the most part, they got everyone. I think, obviously Robert Downey was missing because that's expensive. Same with Chris Evans. But I think for the most part, they got everyone else. And unless I'm missing someone.
No, nothing. None of the major people.
Yeah,
I mean, like Chris Hemsworth is there, and Kate Blanchett, and the dad from the 10 Rings, and
Paul Rudd. Yes,
Paul Rudd has and there is a consistency. Like the guy who does Iron Man's voice is the guy who did it in the first season,
right,
and whatnot. They at least did that. But yeah, it is kind of always a little disappointing with that. Like especially the Iron Man guy. Like I don't think he's nearly as good in that role. Like he's to me the weakest of the non carryover actors.
Right. But I mean that's such a hard role to fill. So
yeah,
I think for whoever takes that job, how can you be
true? But then again, not to beat a dead horse, Lake Bell.
Right.
She doesn't try to sound like Scarlett Johansson. She brings her own thing to the character and does a really, really good job. And in fact, you kind of hinted at this, like her interactions with Haley Atwell as Captain Carter is like one of the highlights, I think, of this season.
Very much so.
To the point where one of many things I would like to see them do is I would love to see the two of them do a movie together. Not live action, animation, like Captain Carter and Black Widow.
Is that like Bell's wheelhouse, like being part of a 2-woman pair in animation? Is that what she does?
I don't know. She's really good. We've talked at length about how good she is in Harley Quinn and in other things. And, I think it would be really fun to see that those two have a really great rapport in this series. Whoever writes them obviously gets credit for that as well as the two actresses, but to see those two do something kind of fun, I don't know what, but that's not my job. So
yeah, I mean the standouts for me were Haley Atwell, Lake Bell, and Kate Blanchett. Again, like I wish we had more of that version of Hela because it was so good, so much fun.
Yeah.
I understand why they only got her for that, one episode for the heavy dialogue because she's a busy and expensive actor. So,
well, I thought she was in the second episode as well.
Right, but she didn't have much to do.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Paul may not want it, but I'd love an IRL Captain Carter movie.
I would like that. I would like that as well. But what I'm saying is I would like to see, I wouldn't want to see Lake Bell as live action Black Widow.
Right.
I would want them to do like an animated one where they're off doing, in an alternate kind of thing.
And she's dead anyway.
That's true. Well, one version of her is dead. And God, I hated that moment. I was just like, no.
How old is Haley Atwell now? Is she believable as a live action Captain Carter these days?
She was in Doctor Strange, and that wasn't that long ago.
Well, she didn't have a whole lot to do except for get her head chopped off. So yeah, she is 41. No, I thought she was older. So yeah, she can still do it.
Yeah.
Totally down.
Yeah.
And Carlos pops in again saying, yes, she is 41. Now, the next point is kind of funny. I want to talk about voice actors that we didn't like or weren't satisfied with. For the Iron Man episode, I'm like, who is this like Jeff Goldblum knockoff they got? I'm like, oh, that was actually Jeff Goldblum. Like this guy sucks as Jeff Goldblum. So I don't know what it was. If it was the dialogue, because I didn't get the typical, weird Jeff Goldblum charm from that episode. It seems more forced to me. Maybe it was the dialogue. Maybe he had a bad day in the recording booth, but it didn't.
I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't notice anything. He seemed to me Jeff
Jeff
Goldblum.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe I just didn't like that episode in general because that was probably my least favorite out of all of them. But yeah, it just didn't seem. I found him so charming in Ragnarok,
right.
and I didn't get that from this episode. Like anyone else fall flat? You mentioned Tony Stark, which
No, yeah, he's the only one that ever struck me as being. I mean, I think again, Chris Evans would have done a much better job as Steve Rogers,
as
but
himself.
yeah, as himself. But the guy they got is fine.
Yeah, I thought he did a serviceable
job.
job.
Yeah, but that's just it. He's fine, and then you put him up against like Chris Hemsworth and Lake Bell, and it's like, oh,
yeah,
this could have been better. So,
Carlos adds, Goldblum is better in movies. Disney gave him a doc series during COVID. I was not aware of this series, but thank you for mentioning that. Yes, maybe you really need the live action to get the full Goldblum effect. Just to guess. So yeah, everyone else did pretty good. Except Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldblum to me. I'm like, dude, you suck at playing yourself. I don't know. Now, one of the big additions, there's a brand new character, a young Mohawk woman, or is it Mohican? I don't know what the proper term is. Let's say Mohican. Kahhori. And I love this episode. It's probably my second favorite. Or third favorite. I forgot to mention that earlier. But yeah, it was so unique and different. And I love that they had a Native American character. What did you make of the character and her episode?
I'm of two minds about that episode because on the one hand, I thought it was the most interesting because it was a new character and we were seeing something, and it was, as you said, it was very different than the other episodes. But at the same time, I didn't like it as much because it's not to me like a what if episode so much, because usually in what if it's
right,
what if this thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe had played out differently,
right? Well, I mean, they did with the Tesseract.
Yeah, kind of, but I don't know, that wasn't enough for me. I mean, and the thing that I actually thought about this afterwards, this might seem like a weird analogy to people, but maybe not. I'm a big reader of the Star Wars novels. And
yes.
There's two kinds of Star Wars novels that they do. There's the kinds that sort of fill in gaps about the movies and the TV shows. And then there's like wholly original ones that have, are set in the same universe, but don't really have as much of a connection.
Right.
And that latter group I never like as much. Like my favorite ones are always the one where it's like, hey, let's show you what it was like to be a member of the Empire during the original trilogy if you really thought the Empire was the way to go. Like if, you're not a bad person, but you joined the military because you wanted to be a pilot. And like, oh, now they just destroyed a planet.
Right.
And that's how I felt about this. Like its lack of connection to the larger MCU made it less engaging for me. But at the same time, it was very interesting to see this other reality and this other culture as well. Because as I've said before, and we'll say again, as an old white guy, I really like learning about different cultures and seeing stories set in different cultures and learning about different people. I know I'm cliche in that, but
no, I appreciate that very, very much. And random question, did the Tesseract give her power of language? Because at the end of her episode, she speaks Spanish and then she shows up later with, perfectly fluent English. I'm like, did she learn all this while we were in between episodes?
I just assumed the universal translator from Star Trek helped her out. So
interesting thing about that episode, if you look in the extras, there's actually an English version of the episodes where they have English instead of Mohican language. Yeah, I didn't watch it because it seems kind of pointless to me. Like, I don't know. I mean, I could see why some people would prefer it, like the kind of people that prefer dubs over subtitle, even though they're wrong. But yeah, they had an English option for that episode in the extras.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that.
Carlos says she's a master of space now, so she has time to learn. Yes, she had her, or maybe she had the Rosetta Stone, Infinity Stone.
She had a bunch of Babel cassettes lying around,
or whatever the new app is that sponsors podcasts. I forget.
Right,
what that one
Babelfish from I wonder if that's where they got that from.
Sure, let's go with that.
Well, you know what the Babelfish is,
yes.
right? Okay.
Yes. From is that from Hitchhikers?
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah. Now, one recurring theme in both season 1 and season 2 of What If is it's always the thing with Doctor Strange. Like, what's up with that guy, and why is he such a problem here? Like, any theories, Paul?
Well, let's be honest. The guy's arrogant as fuck.
Yeah.
And he also had his heart broken. You know, I mean, that comes up in I would script the title and call it Mountain of Madness, but that's the H.P. Lovecraft story. But the
Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness. You know, where like part of the reason that one of the universes is the way it is because he wanted Christine back. I think they just realized after, they decided to try it in the first season and they were like, you know what? Cumberbatch is really good being a dick sometimes. You see hints of that like in the movies, like there's
in Star Trek.
Well, no, I was talking about there's a scene in Avengers Infinity War where he's kind of like being all snarky to Tony Stark, and he's like, I don't fucking work for you.
Yeah,
like,
well, I mean, to be fair, I thought all of his responses were jest when he was squabbling with Tony.
Yeah, but he can be, I think, a good jerk, and I think that's why they were like, let's just run with this.
Doesn't he call him a dick? He says something to him. He's like, I'm the guardian of this time stone, you dick, or something like that.
Yeah, there is something like that. Yeah, in the earlier part of that movie. So
Carlos adds, it's the accent. Well, yes, if you do have that kind of accent, you sound more. Your snark is more powerful. That's a proven fact over time.
Yeah. So.
I think Galifianakis actually asked him about that in Between Two Ferns. It's like, would people know you're a bad actor if you didn't have that accent? Something.
That's a funny question, but yeah, I think he does a good job being kind of the bad guy of the What If verse.
Yeah, I hope that is not the case for season 3. Because I'm kind of over it. I'm like, yes, we get it. Like he's angry and heartbroken and he wants to destroy everything, blah, blah.
Right.
Speaking of which, what would you like to see for season 3? I mean, it's pretty much a shoo-in that we're going to get it.
I would think so. I mean, I know they're doing Marvel Zombies first, and then they're doing season 3, but they already have they have like an episode done that I guess for some reason they didn't run this time. And they showed like a clip of it online, but I forget what it is.
Oh, I totally missed that.
I mean, some of which is stuff that I would like to see more of. Again, I'd like to see another Captain Carter. I'd love to see, more Howard the Duck, more Darcy, more Black Widow. I'd love to see them bring in Squirrel Girl.
I'd love to see Squirrel Girl anywhere.
I think she's a fun character, and to have her show up and interact with Howard and Darcy would be really fun. I know that Ms. Marvel is going to be in Marvel Zombies, but I would like to see something, with her. Right. I don't know what though.
Well, now that the licenses are all cleared up, I'd love to see like X-Men and Fantastic Four,
Right.
Silver Surfer.
Well, they asked them about that, and they said that the I guess season 2 was largely written before season 1 ran.
right.
But the deal is they can't do anything with anybody in What If they haven't already been introduced in something else, which is why you
Um,
didn't have Sam Wilson as Captain America turn up in season 1 or season 2 because he wasn't at the time they were writing it, they didn't have him established. So, yeah, once they get like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four out into the world, then they can start showing those characters. So that would be interesting, which makes me wonder, given that season 3 won't run until after Deadpool, could we see Deadpool in What If?
oh, yeah. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And all the characters that will be introduced in Deadpool, like Taylor Swift Dazzler.
Right. Right. Well, exactly. Right. I mean, there's possibility of that. There's talk about girl pool, dog pool, Wolverine pool, pool cleaner. I don't know. But like, yeah, I mean,
this is the clip you were mentioning. Carlos
that's
says,
what it was.
Winter Soldier with Red Guardian on the run was the clip they showed to tease season 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I don't think season 3 is going to be for a while because, as I said, zombies is the end of the year. So I guess 2025 is when we'll see What If 3.
Well, now that we're kind of let's just go on tangents now. Were there any characters in What If season 2 that made you think, hey, I miss that guy? I wonder what he's up to, because I forgot how much fun Winter Soldier Bucky was now that he's been a good guy for a long time. But I miss that. Although he did have this weird dirt eye effect. I'm like, that's how he's evil. He doesn't wash his face. But yeah, I miss that version of Bucky. And it was nice to see it for a little bit in What If.
I mean, the only one, the Shang-Chi stuff with Hela made me like kind of go like, okay, I'd like, I hope they get to do another episode. I mean, another movie with that guy or bring him in somehow. Cause I really did like that movie a lot. And
yeah,
it does seem like I know there's going to do something, but like, I wish they would do it already. Cause it's like, when is that going to sort of pay off? And when are the Eternals like, I know we're not supposed to like the Eternals, but like, when, is the Eternals going to become like the Inhumans where we kind of just go, oh yeah, that didn't really happen.
I don't think so. I hope not. And although I like the Eternals better than mostly from a technical standpoint, because it was filmed on location a lot as opposed to these green screen projects that most Marvel films are.
I ended up liking Eternals more the second time, in part because I wasn't sitting there trying to figure out how this fit into the larger cinematic universe. And I just took it as a science fiction story. And when you look at it as a science fiction story, it's actually a pretty interesting one.
Yes.
And it works better that way.
And I love that they implemented the element of, the brain having finite capacity, because that's always an issue with like these immortal characters or these centuries old characters. I'm like, they can't possibly remember anything. I know it doesn't scale exactly
right
to human form, but I love that they included that. It's interesting. I watched Saltburn last month, and I cannot think of Barry Keoghan as anything but Druig. Because throughout the movie, I'm like, Druig sucks. So,
yeah.
Carlos has 2 excellent comment, or 1.5. Ruthless Aggression Bucky. So that's a WWE reference for those that don't follow wrestling. Yes, this was a great point that I loved. He loved seeing Loki's. I don't even know how to pronounce
Yggdrasil.
Yes, the world tree showing ties to the Marvel. I absolutely love that was part of it. And it makes you think how far in advance these things are planned, because I believe this series was plotted before Loki season 2, so this was in the works, or if Loki's fate was in the works for a while, if it's being tied to other properties. So, or maybe that could have been just a happy coincidence, and the World Tree was always going to be the World Tree at the end, but now that there's a Loki tie into it. But yeah, I love, like, I want to see like Kevin Feige's office where he has, I don't know, like one of those police things with all the threads connecting everywhere. Like, But in my head, that's how the MCU is plotted out. Could be wrong.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said earlier, like, a lot of what I would like to see going forward is just a return of a lot of the sort of cooler characters, like, Darcy and and then again, just as we were sitting here, I'm thinking like, oh, wait a minute, like I would like to see something with She-Hulk. And as long as we're on the subject, where's Megan Thee Stallion's what if? I mean, like, she's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe now.
This is true.
Her, maybe her and Dazzler tour together.
I mean, is this Captain Carter's series, or do you want to see the Guardians of the Multiverse, as they are called, or do you want them to do a whole new set of adventures?
I mean, one of the things that I've liked about the way that the 2 seasons have been structured is that they go back to the structure, the original, when the Marvel stuff all started, whereas you had a bunch of these individual instances, and then everything kind of slowly comes together, and you realize, like, oh, it's all building towards something. And I've said this on the show before, and probably will say it again. But one of the things that I don't like about the current state of the Marvel universe is I don't know how this is all going to come together. Like, how are they going to tie the Eternals and She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel and all this into some new thing? I mean, I'm sure they are. I just kind of wish the pieces would start to come together. Granted, you don't have 9 movies coming out in 9 days, so it's a little harder to.
And last question for you. Are you surprised that Fox News has complained about a Black Watcher? Because it's Jeffrey Wright's voice.
Right. They did?
No. I mean, are you surprised they haven't?
Oh.
And he is tanner than the comic book version of Uatu.
No. Although what I would love to know from Jeffrey Wright, and this is obscure, is whether anybody at Fox has asked him about the fact that on the Venture Brothers, he played a character that was basically a parody of MODOK.
Right.
Because that must have been a weird conversation. But no, I'm not surprised by that at all. Although I did see a thing today, actually, where they said that online trolls were complaining about the fact that between What If and Echo, they had dared to do 2 different shows about Native Americans, and why do they have to do so many shows about Native Americans? And it's like, right. And I think it was somebody from Echo who's just like, yeah, whatever, go away. Like, yeah. I mean, and I know that people were also complaining about Captain Carter, but again, like,
those people are, you cannot complain about Haley Atwell. If you do, you are wrong.
But they do. And to Disney's credit, Disney is basically now taking the attitude of like, yay, whatever. It's like 6 angry people and nobody listens to them, and
Here's an interesting question. They kept bringing up excursions, just like it was brought up in Loki and Multiverse of Madness. It's more likely would get it in the Guardians of the Multiverse or What If season 3. No? Yes. Maybe that is their role. They go around the multiverse sewing up these incursions. Aren't they? They're incursions. Is that right?
Yeah, incursions, I think is. Well, that's what they referred to them in Doctor Strange.
Yeah. and the comics.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, that maybe that's the overarching arc to season 3 is that they have to go and sort of fill in these holes, where they are, and or maybe we get a Guardians of the Multiverse animated movie or something. It's funny because I was thinking about this. I recently rewatched the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special.
Yes.
And Werewolf by Night. And I thought, both of these were kind of cool. I would like to see them do maybe some more of these things. I've sort of said I'd like to see a Howard the Duck movie. Maybe not movie, but maybe an hour-long Howard the Duck story. Maybe you could do a Captain Carter, Black Widow, Thelma and Louise. You know what I mean? Do kind of do sort of one-off animated specials and things like that, where you don't have to do 6, 8, 10 episodes. You can just tell one story, and if it happens to be 45 minutes long, cool. If it happens to be an hour and a half, cool. I don't know.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, I think that could be kind of interesting, because again, I mean, I'm sure somebody would make the argument, well, too much Howard the Duck is not enough, is too much, rather.
For the record, I enjoyed that movie as a kid. I found it entertaining and silly.
Well, who wants to direct a new Howard the Duck movie?
Leah Thompson?
Yeah.
She does, really?
She does.
Oh, that's excellent.
She's gotten into directing in the last few years, and she's I really want to do a Howard the Duck movie.
Hasn't she directed some nerd superhero TV? And she's done a few projects that I
think she's done some of the DC stuff for the CW, I think.
Yeah. Let's IMDb her now. Yeah, she I know she does. Let's see. Oh, she did an episode of Star Trek Picard. I did not know that.
That's what it was. Yes.
But no, there's something else. But Picard is pretty cool. Oh, she does a Squirrel Girl podcast. She was a guest on that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow, she got even cooler.
Yeah.
I always loved her as an actress. And
she could get her kid to do something. That would be fun.
Is there, I don't know her kid. Does he or she act?
She does. Did you ever see the second Zombieland movie?
No.
Oh, because she was in that.
Ah.
And she's really funny in that. I forget her name. It should be on her IMDb page. Her kid's done a bunch of stuff. I forget the kid's name though, but yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel so old. The actors that we grew up with when their kids are in things now.
Right. Right. Well,
that's terrible. Well, no, good for them. good for that family. Yeah. So that'll be a wrap on our What If Season 2 review. Paul and I both enjoyed the series, even though it did have a few bumps in the road. Where it ended up was quite excellent, and I was satisfied with this experience, as Baymax would. I would tell Baymax.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Actually, I have another question for you before we go.
Yes.
What did you think about the fact that they released the 9 episodes in 9 days and over the holidays? Because I thought that was quite a good idea.
It had no effect on me because I was traveling for the holidays. So I ended up binging it all when I came back anyway.
Okay, then. I rescind my question.
I like to binge watch. So if you give me everything all at once, I will be happier than waiting for it. Although the one aspect of releasing in a staggered manner or weekly is I do like the water cooler talk, such as it were. And, so was one of my favorite things of Game of Thrones and series like that. Always catching up with your friends,
right?
About, oh, what did you think of that? What do you think's happening next? Whereas if you binge it, we're not all in the same schedule. So, but in general, just give me everything.
Okay.
What did you think of it? I mean,
I liked it. I tend not to binge things even when I can.
right.
What I ended up doing is like I watch like 1 or 2 episodes a day every day for like a week. And then of course when I get towards the end, I'm always like, I really want to know. So like I often will end up binging like the last 3 episodes in the same night. But like I thought this was really good, especially because it was the holidays and there wasn't anything else
Right.
on. And so it was like, okay, every night. And these episodes are also short. So
Right.
if they're half an hour. So like, it was like every night, 12:05, I would stop reading. I would turn on my Xbox, fire it up and, watch this one episode and be like, and then I would go back to reading or something. So
On the downside, if something is released all at once midweek, I will mess up my sleep schedule just to watch all of it. So,
right.
and there are a lot of advantages of staggered releases.
Yeah, I mean, if they had put all 9 out on the same day, like
I would have watched it.
I would have, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would have been up till 5 in the morning.
Yeah,
and by the end, I would have just been like,
yeah,
it's
like, God damn it, Doctor Strange, not this shit again.
Yeah, this conversation of ours would have been really different because it would have been like, what do you think of the last episode? It'd be like, well, the monkeys that were flying, and then somebody like played the national anthem, and
I mean, to that point, it does, how you watch it does shape your perception of it. So there are advantages. I think I binged it over 2 days.
Right.
Which for 9 half-hour episodes isn't, over holiday break, that's fine.
Yeah.
But as I said, if it came out midweek during the work week, I would have watched all 9 at once, and
right,
whatever happens in the office the next day happens. Right. or doesn't. So
yeah. And there's also the thing with Marvel stuff, which I've noticed with the movies and the TV shows, where like the first time I watch it, I'm trying to take everything in.
Yeah.
And then it isn't until I watch it like a second time or a third time, I'm like, okay, now I can kind of, like, I remember the best example of this is the first time I saw Captain America First Avenger, I'm trying to take it all in. And I was like, all right, that was okay. And it wasn't until I watched it like a second or third time that I was like, oh, this is really good. Really good. Yeah. This is a really cool movie, So,
but also at that time too, like Marvel was still kind of new, or the MCU was still kind of new to us. So we didn't know what kind of quality to expect.
Right.
I didn't know much about Chris Evans aside from Scott Pilgrim, I think was the only other thing I saw him in. So, Fantastic Four as well. So, my expectations were kind of low. I'm like, the Human Torch is going to be Captain, the guy that sucked into those Fantastic Four movies is going to be Captain America now. What? So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it's, like everything else, when you watch it and what you've watched, like, shapes your expectations and your perceptions.
Yeah. I've been going through that lately with Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Which I watched the first season. I thought it was pretty cool. I watched the second season. I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. And the last couple days I've been going back and I rewatched the entire first season, and I'm liking it even more now. Because I'm sort of like, okay, this is way closer to like original Star Trek than I really sort of gave it credit for. So
yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things about rewatching, is picking up the nuances and details you didn't get the first time around.
Yep.
So guys, be sure to go to Paul's website for all kinds of excellent content on video games, science fiction. You had some jazz interviews and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it gets a little esoteric at times, but
and that is what makes the world and your website interesting. And be sure to join us next week, where we have it'll be a very different episode than what you've seen so far. It will be a 4-person panel, barring any further illnesses, on Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, the Godzilla series on Apple TV Plus. I'm super excited to see the finale and to hear your thoughts on it. Paul will be coming back for that. Our friend McLean will be coming back for that. And Carlos, who we usually see in the comments section, will be joining us on camera. Again, assuming he doesn't get snowed in Chicago. I think it's an iceberg at this point. So hopefully Carlos is not a popsicle next week, and he will be able to join us too. And speaking of which, I will be on Carlos's podcast this weekend, revisiting the Mania. I don't have a Chiron prepared, but look up Revisiting the Mania on YouTube and Facebook and join us for a conversation on WrestleMania 20. And we will see you next week on RPAD TV. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.